Hello and welcome to our latest and greatest edition of Better Together Arizona. I'm your host, Angela Hughey. So proud to have our good friend and our 2024 Unity Agent, Nate Rhoton, the CEO of 1 in 10 with us today. How are you, my friend?
I am doing well. Thank you so much for having me. So excited.
So excited that you're here. And we were talking right before, the camera started rolling that we've been doing these conversations for over a decade now.
I feel like a news anchor with you at this point.
Well, there you go.
Yeah,
you are a very good anchor. I know you can co-anchor some of these important discussions that I think we're going to have here in 2025. We're entering into a new year with a new president being sworn into office on January 20th, who has some very different ideas when it comes to our LGBTQ plus community, right?
Yeah.
And so I think individually and collectively as organizational leaders, I think we are bracing ourselves and our teams for what will be, I keep saying it's going to be a little windy out there.
That is a great way to describe it for sure.
I'm like, get your galoshes and your rain gear because we are headed into the storm. But how do you feel about 2025 as we go into it, and what are the types of things that you think about?
I think, like much of our community, the last few months have been filled with a bit of anxiety. And at the same time, I am reminding myself that the arc of change works this way.
It does.
And by having that pendulum swing in this fashion, it's inviting different conversations that I think as a country we need. We need them to heal. We need them to seek understanding. And there is a significant portion of our population that still doesn't understand the LGBTQ community. And this is our opportunity to have those conversations, as you like to say, Angela, a cup of coffee, and to seek to understand one another. And there's no reason that we can't come together and have those conversations and seek to find common ground while educating one another on the place where we're coming from. And I think if there's a win from 2025, it will be that. It's the ability to find more cohesiveness and to really come to the center. As you said before this.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It's interesting. Sherry and I went out with some family members, and we have different political leanings. So we went out and had a nice dinner over the weekend. And what I found was a willingness from all of us to kind of listen to one another. And, I had family members that said, like, I want you to tell me if the incoming administration does something that is against the LGBTQ plus community, because they just don't really understand. And I said, well, unfortunately, that'll be on January 20th. So we'll start our conversations then. But what I found hope in was the willingness to listen to what our concerns are as members of a very diverse minority community who many people still don't realize we just don't have the same rights and protections as our non-LGBTQ plus counterparts, right? And so as our dinner conversation's going on, I said, this impacts us in employment and housing and public accommodations, and of course, other ways beyond that. And our family members were like, how? And I said, it's not unlawful to fire us simply for our sexual orientation or gender identity. It's not unlawful to discriminate in housing or public accommodations. And then getting into this deeper conversation that public accommodations isn't just like a restaurant. It's not just about bathrooms, which those folks and organizations that oppose LGBTQ equality love to talk about public restrooms. This is about having the ability to turn someone away from a doctor's office or a hospital, perhaps in an emergency setting, right? And what I found from our family was that they did not know this. And so to me, it was a reminder of how much work there still is to do, how much education there still is to do. And that also, if you are someone that falls outside of whatever diverse community population that maybe feels that they are being targeted in discriminatory ways, which obviously are concerns we have for our LGBTQ plus community, sometimes folks just don't even realize. Like,
Well, and you and I feel like we've been talking about this for
sure,
decades in
yeah,
some ways. Really, maybe it's been about 15 years. But for most folks, this is not part of their everyday life.
it's not.
It's like when well, many people don't open the newspaper anymore, but it's like when you would open the newspaper and you would scan and you would read certain articles, and there's other articles you wouldn't read
Yeah.
because it didn't pertain to you, like the sports section for me. But, and not to make light of this because this is very serious. There's a very serious impact to our community with these protections or lack thereof. But for many folks, it's not part of their everyday life.
Yeah.
So why would they seek to educate themselves?
Yeah.
This is our opportunity as being part of this community to have those conversations, to reach across and to build that bridge. And I think that's what's exciting about 2025.
Yeah.
Is that otherwise, if we hadn't had this opportunity, which again is what I'm continuing to call it, then it would have been the same. And this lack of understanding would have been burbling under the surface. And folks wouldn't have been inclined to reach across and have these conversations.
Right. I feel like there is great opportunity in adverse situations, and also if you're comfortable, you're not in the right space, right? Yeah. And so I think that it's an opportunity for our community to also really work our resiliency muscle. Which maybe needs a little workout. I'm kind of thinking of the gym.
We can always be working out.
We can always be working out our resiliency muscle, maybe in some tight, rainbow colored shorts, just for the heck of it. But, and I think it's good to have a sense of humor too.
You have to.
Yeah, because it's going to be a little windy out there as we talked about. So for folks that, maybe don't know you as well as I'm fortunate enough to know you, tell folks about yourself and then 1 in 10 and the great work you're doing with LGBTQ plus youth.
Sure. I did not set out in, as people are thinking about what career they want to grow up and do, I still feel like I'm waiting for that. But I didn't set out to work in nonprofit. I majored in econ and finance and worked in that sector in a Fortune 100 and then with a construction company. Up until 2015. So I was in that sector for almost 20 years in the for-profit sector. This is where you have to be careful what you do as a volunteer, because my volunteerism is what brought me to this work. I had volunteered with various organizations doing fundraising, and I found I really liked it. And I worked with a particular community leader, Linda Elliott, who is the predecessor to my role at 1 in 10. And when Linda caught wind that I was looking for a change, I was getting closer to 40 and wanted to start that next chapter, she and I met for dinner, and she said, I'd really like for you to apply for this role as our first development director.
Wow.
I thought about it for several weeks, and she kept sending me text messages. She's a hard person to say no to. And I realized this is an opportunity to get into a different sector in a really powerful way to create change. And at the time I had wanted to potentially enter politics, but it was a moment where I was going to be part of a very minority party. And how much change could I really affect? Now, everyone knows you can affect change no matter what the numbers are in the legislature or those types of things. But working in a nonprofit space, I found I would be able to impact the community that I hold so dear and am a part of. And in this particular case with 1 in 10, serving LGBTQ youth in Arizona, a state where I am a 5th generation Arizonan, meant the world to me. And to see how we can expand and grow the organization to serve particularly young people in rural Arizona. One of our satellite sites that I love to talk about is Sholo, Arizona. And to be in those communities and to be able to expand and grow really ignited a fire in me. So the rest is kind of history. Now it's been 9 years, 2 months, and 17 days. I like to joke. I don't really know the number of days, but I feel so fortunate to be doing this work. And my first week as executive director, CEO, I was driving in and my stepdad called me and he said, I just want to remind you that most people have to retire to do what they really are passionate about. You're getting to do it now. And I've never forgotten that, because there are hard days, even though it's something that I really enjoy. And I love my team. I love the youth that we serve, my board of directors, this fabulous community that continues to support us since 1993. But you have to remind yourself of those reasons and really your why,
Right.
On almost a daily basis, because it's difficult work.
It's difficult work. And I'm curious, you mentioned Sholo. Do you find the demand for the services and programs that 1 in 10 provide even more in need in the more rural areas?
Yes, and I like to say that 1 in 10 serves youth across the entire spectrum, whatever that spectrum could be, whether it's socioeconomic, age. We technically serve ages 11 to 24 through very age-specific and appropriate programs, but we're providing support to young people at a time when they need it most, according to them. So if they're experiencing homelessness at 18 to 24, we have our Pond housing program that is providing that supportive housing, and we're really working with them to ensure that they can exit to independent living and be successful young adults. To a 12-year-old that is feeling alienated at school in Sholo, Arizona, and doesn't feel like they have community, and they feel like they're the only one in their class that identifies this way. And then they come to our weekly satellite site and understand that, hey, here's a group of friends.
You're not alone.
You're not alone.
Yeah.
And you can come together once a week and find support. And that's really the magic of 1 in 10. It's the ability to create community. And every year when we do our annual survey, the number one reason why youth come to 1 in 10 is to find community. Well, so it's just that simple.
I feel like everyone's searching for community.
Think of during the pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like we haven't fully, as a nation or a world, recovered from the pandemic. Like, we are still searching to find that sense of community.
I would agree with that.
Regardless of what your age is. And obviously, young people so adversely affected when, they were they didn't have that socialization that they would get with their peers, in a school setting for 2 years. So that I would imagine has created some social awkwardness. And again, we have these muscles we have to work on, right? These socialization muscles, which just create healthier human beings.
100%.
Yeah. So we think it's going to be a little windy out there. We're getting our galoshes and our rain gear on. What do you think are some of the biggest challenges that LGBTQ plus youth face here in the state and in our nation in the coming year?
Nationally, LGBTQ youth were surveyed by the Trevor Project at the end of last year, and 90% said that the election made them feel worse about themselves.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because I think it's a really important highlight to where our young people are today. They very much still feel like they are recovering from an election, and they don't see themselves in the elected bodies that are technically representing them. And this is a critical piece, because our elected officials very much need to listen to everyone, not just the party that elected them.
Right.
And I hope this is an opportunity for them to do that. I have spoken about previously that Governor Hobbs met with some of our youth in regards to a pronoun bill that was introduced in the state legislature in 2023, one of the first bills for that legislative session. And she was already planning to veto it, but she wanted to hear firsthand from the young people that it would impact. And I think that type of leadership, regardless of how someone may feel about Governor Hobbs' leadership in general, whether they're Republican or independent, it's that ability to seek to understand, to reach out and understand how this specific piece of legislation is going to affect those that it's targeting. And not all legislators do that. And this is an opportunity that I hope more will do so, because in doing that, you're going to have better solutions, you're going to have better decision making. And if you do choose to take that strong stance and stand up against your party, perhaps, you can do that with the informed information, if you will, of the constituency that it's impacting. And I think that's what's critical when they tell their story as to why they're vetoing or why they're voting the way they are.
So what I'm hearing from you is that stories matter.
Stories matter, and that there will be, I believe even on the first day of the Trump administration, specific executive orders that target the LGBTQ community, and
Absolutely,
in
without doubt.
particular our trans community. And this is where, as a gay cis male, I have learned so much from our trans staff, our trans board members, and most importantly, our trans youth. And I really invite America and Arizona to reach out and read stories, talk to people. Most Americans don't feel they know someone who is trans, which isn't necessarily true, because they may know someone and that person just hasn't outed themselves as being trans, which
Right.
is up to them to decide to do or not. But once you get to know someone who is, I think a lot of the fear and, frankly, ignorance about what it is and what it isn't diminishes quickly.
Because most people just don't understand gender identity, and that
Right.
we all have a gender identity. This, where we're at as a state and a nation in not understanding gender identity, or not knowing that we know someone who is
Right.
trans, kind of reminds me of where we were in like the 80s
Mm-hmm.
when it came to knowingly knowing someone who was gay or lesbian or bisexual, right? And I remember when we launched One Community, I would always tell people, we are just as boring as everyone else. You know, I'm like, I hear these stories about our sexual proclivities, and, you know, somebody should have told me, because
Yeah.
I didn't get that memo. I just happened to love someone who is of the same, has the same sexual orientation and same gender as I do.
Well,
So
the face of our community in the 70s and early 80s was in secrecy.
Yeah.
It was cloaked in it made it seem, and in many ways perhaps was, because that's how they had to live.
for safety reasons.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now today we can be normal families, and I think that is a really incredible turn of events.
Well, can be normal families. And I
Right.
think the point also is we just are normal families, right?
Exactly.
And, as you so rightfully told me right before we started this, who knows? A normal family might be 2 girls and 2 cats.
Exactly.
Or it could be you and your dog, who you take everywhere. But I mean, I think there is this sense of family. And again, which goes back to the idea of community, and that everybody really wants this true sense of belonging, and wants the opportunity to just be who they are.
Because that's
Wonderful.
how we're the best version of ourselves.
It is. It is. So, I mean, I think we're touching on a lot of these things, but the reality is, and I hope that folks who feel distress about the incoming administration and the turbulent times that are likely ahead for our LGBTQ plus community understand is that while it's a little going to be rocky out there, we've come a really long way, haven't we?
We have. And I was just reflecting on this the other day. I grew up in Flagstaff, Arizona, young Mormon kid. And in 1992, I distinctly remember I didn't know a single kid in Flagstaff High School that I knew emphatically was part of the LGBTQ community. And I tried as hard as I could to not be labeled as such. It was pretty difficult for me, but I tried. I did read the sports section back then. And it's I think it's dramatic to see in just really, I guess you could say 30 years. I guess that means my 30th high school reunion
It's right around the corner.
Right around the corner. But to see the change,
Yeah.
we can't let go of that. And I think particularly in times that some may label as dark periods or times, we have to hold on to that, because today, everywhere I go, I can talk about it for the most part, and I don't feel in danger. I don't feel threatened. Now, there are certainly stories across America where that's not the case. And
Certainly.
I recognize, even for our LGB community that have found greater acceptance in many areas, there are still hate crimes happening. There are still people being terminated from jobs. There are still people not being hired for jobs, or maybe rented an apartment because of their identities. And we can't forget that there is still so much more to accomplish. However, I'm able to live out and proud, and in a way that, frankly, I was not able to really even 15 years ago.
Yeah, no,
would say.
I agree. One community turned 16 in December, and I know, remarkable. And it seems like it was just yesterday. And neither of us have aged a bit. I do want to say that part, but
some secrets there, but
I
that's
know. I
another
look at
podcast.
pictures of us and I'm like, we were just babies and we were so idealistic. And I love that we're still very idealistic. I think I'm still a dreamer, and I
Yeah.
believe that I really do believe that the work ahead of us is limitless, and that and our better angels, if you will, and meeting people where they're at. But I remember right before we launched One Community, Sherry was very successful. She was in a sales position in telecom, and she was the top performer of her team, and was receiving accolades for being the top performer. And she'd been at her company for about 6 months, and we'd gone out with her peers, and they'd gotten to know us as a couple, and everyone was very accepting and really, really enjoyed her for the person that she is, because she's awesome, and was very accepting of me as well. And she said, I think it's time. I have a really good relationship with my manager. I'm just going to let him know who I am. This is what so many folks just still don't understand. And she did. She just, the difference between a Tuesday and a Wednesday was she let her manager know her sexual orientation. And the next day he put her on a performance review.
Wow.
And so I'll never forget that. And I won't forget how the mental health impacts of that. And I think what people don't understand about, the work we do towards equal rights and equal opportunity, and why we think non-discrimination legislation is so important to include our LGBT plus community, is because people should be judged based on their skills, nothing less and nothing more. You shouldn't have the right to turn someone away from a housing opportunity or from a restaurant or a hotel based simply on who they are or how they identify. And the reality is, in this state, unless you're in one of the 11 municipalities that have adopted LGBTQ plus inclusive ordinances, that's still not unlawful. And so we have more work ahead of us.
I think what is shocking is that as we look at the civil rights trajectory, this morning I was listening to President Carter's funeral, and they were talking about how he was celebrated at the time of his presidency for having the most women leading parts of his administration.
Yeah.
That was not that long ago.
No.
So women, and not much before that, they couldn't hold a credit card. So we as a society have a track record of civil rights advancements, and it waves back and forth. The arc or pendulum does. And we have to keep that in mind and continue to attempt to march forward, even when we feel the pendulum is swinging the other way.
Yeah. Determination,
Yeah.
resiliency. I think 2025 is about kind of getting up and dusting yourself off and, starting all over again. Just keep kind of meeting people where they're at and having those cups of coffees. So let's talk about us, because I think organizationally, it's such a joy to be collaborative and good partners. We've partnered on projects and measures over the years, but talk about how 1 in 10 started working with One Community.
I think 1 in 10 started working with One Community prior to me being part of the organization.
True.
So well over 9 years ago. The LGBTQ community in Arizona, and specifically Maricopa County, is a small bubble, if you will. And we have to work more together than we do apart. Now, there are many examples of us not working together, not One Community and 1 in 10, but our
Sure.
LGBTQ community. But we won't focus on that, because this is a time that we need to be working together more than any other. But One Community and 1 in 10, ironically, get confused for one another.
All the time.
You send me emails
I
of
know.
people meaning to contact 1 in 10.
Yeah.
And so there's that. But it's really more about telling stories legislatively. And I always say I want to depoliticize what it means to be LGBTQ in Arizona, and for America for that matter, because I don't believe it should belong to one party or the
No.
other. Our rights shouldn't be advanced by one party or the other. And the more we can talk about this to folks that prioritize, let's say, families, we can talk about how important it is to create a safe space for LGBTQ families to be successful in Arizona, and what that does, not only as a taxpayer, but also in so many ways within a community. And that's where One Community and 1 in 10 first came together. It's having those coffees, it's knocking on those doors, it's having those conversations with elected representatives, again, on both sides of the aisle. And together we're stronger in telling that story. 1 in 10 from a youth perspective, and one community really understanding the legislative pieces in a way that I really appreciate the leadership that you all have taken, and really walking a fine line behind what is practical and what's legally possible versus what may be possible in a state like California.
Right.
Arizona is not California.
It's not.
Also, our country was founded on religious liberties and freedom. And I think that's important for us to remember. Regardless of your religious ideology, we need to respect one another's religious values. And I think that's something that one community and 1 in 10 understand. And we want to be able to move things forward while also respecting various religious values.
Absolutely. But, what I like to talk about is LGBTQ plus inclusion and religious liberty do not have to be oppositional, right? And obviously, we're very supportive of the introduction of equality and fairness for all Arizonans. I think it's important to reintroduce the bill in 2025, knowing that it is, without a doubt, very, very unlikely to say that it has a path forward this year. But I think it is important to introduce the bill so that we can sit down and have those cups of coffee with elected officials on all sides of the aisle, and they actually have policy to look at, right? So so that it's very tangible, and that folks can see that we are talking about equal rights for all Arizonans. One of the things that I do really enjoy about the Equality and Fairness for All Arizonans Act is our support of making sure that religious minorities in the workplace have equal protections. I like to say equality means equality for everyone, not just people that we deem to be similar to us or we believe have the same views and perspectives. And I think that just makes for a healthy society. So we're grateful for your personal support and 1 in 10 being supportive of equality and fairness. And I think also just your willingness to always share your personal story and to lead on the stories and telling of the stories of LGBTQ plus youth in our great state, because our youth, regardless of how they identify, are Arizona's future. They are our most precious resource. And we want to make sure that we all work together to create an opportunity for all of them to thrive in this great state.
We used to have a tagline that said, today's youth, tomorrow's leaders. And I really believe that the youth of today are already our leaders. And so we have to listen to them. We have to amplify those voices, whether that's at the state legislature or in city council hearings or meetings, or just out in the community. There is a lot to be learned from young people. And so I implore and invite all of our community to really pay attention and listen to our current young generation and learn from them.
Yeah. Well, the future is in their hands, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So great to see you, my friend.
Good to see you too. Thanks for the opportunity, Angela.
You got it.